So we will post the recording of this session on the website, which leads me to my next comment, which is the questions, of which there were many from last week, both regarding the PPP program as well as the EIDL program, as well as the Vermont DOL questions. Those questions have been posted to the website, and Casey, I'm going to ask if you could post the link to the business resiliency URL in the chat. That would be great. So under the last week's recorded session, you'll see a link to questions and answers. That page has the questions that were asked and the answers that were either answered by BDCC staff, by Susan Mazza of the SBA, or from DOL. Okay, so at this point, I think I'm going to just do a little bit of a recap. Week one, last week I referred to that week as being, it was feeling like we were slightly concussed. We really were just getting our arms around the situation. Week two, the programs were announced, the EIDL program and the PPP program, and I felt a little bit of optimism. The next week we focused on, the how. So how is it that you access those programs? The PPP through the traditional lenders, the EIDL program is through the SBA, the expedited or streamlined application. This week we're focusing on the technical. So, what are some of the issues regarding those programs? What are some of the detailed questions around those programs, and how do you find the answers? So moving on now to the next agenda item, I'd like to reach out to I know Erica's on the call, so our federal delegation. If we could, I'm going to try to find her to unmute her. There we go. Erica, you are unmuted. I'd love it if you could give us any updates from your corner of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Erica Campbell from Senator Sanders' office. I am also wondering, I missed what you said earlier about SBA. Is Susan able to be on the call today or not?
No, Susan is not on the call today. We have
okay.
Deborah Boudrio of the Vermont Small Business Development Center, who is going to be speaking with us. Yeah.
Excellent. That's fabulous. SBDC is doing a great job. So I guess I will start just by saying that the Vermont delegation and staff members continue to field a lot of questions and work with businesses to try to get them the best answers. As you all know, these programs have been changing, and it's a challenging situation to try to navigate the changes as the programs are rolling out. We have been working on new legislation to improve some of these programs and to add money into them. There's still a lot to be determined about what will be in that final package, but on the Democratic side, for example, there was $250 billion more added into the Paycheck Protection Program. Was really nice to see about this is that a good chunk of it is sort of set aside for specific types of lenders that may not have been able to get at the table as easily or navigate all the rules and maybe didn't qualify to become a lender. For example, there's a $455 billion for community-based lenders like CDFIs, minority depository institutions, microlenders, et cetera, and small banks and credit unions. So those are some great things we are happy to see. There was, so hopefully they will stay in the next bill. Again, a lot being negotiated still. $50 billion more for the EIDL economic injury disaster loans, and the grants, 15 billion more for those grants. There's some other nuanced things around improvements to PPP and a little bit more forgivable amount, payroll forgivable amount for the calculation. So we'll see what happens and keep you posted there. Going back to things that are happening right now on these programs, we continue to hear from a lot of businesses that they have not heard anything back from SBA on their EIDL. They may have applied too early and then never knew they were supposed to reapply with that new application, but some have applied after and still haven't heard anything. So, we know that but I think some businesses are getting pretty anxious there. And on the PPP, we've had the first round where small businesses and sole proprietors were allowed to apply, and today was the first day for self-employed. I think there's a lot of questions about how the loan is going to be calculated. There's a sort of, you use net income if you don't have any employees. You don't. It's a different kind of a program. So I think there's some of the banks are trying to figure that out. Business advisors, maybe SBDC has some thoughts on that. I know for farms, for example, they have a slightly different calculation, and their net income doesn't always come out that high because of depreciation factors. So there's just a lot of issues that people are trying to navigate, and we're trying to help as much as possible. I think that's about it. I'm happy to answer more questions. I feel like I might have been missing something. Oh, obviously, we're still getting a lot of questions about pandemic unemployment, and when, sort of for self-employed folks to apply. And, I think the Vermont DOL is they're working around the clock trying to roll that out and get that money out the door, and that additional $600 per week. So,
yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Erica, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. I see Representative Tolino. Would you like to say a few words? Thank you. You were unmuted. We might be having a co-host
Sorry.
battle. Okay, there you go.
I'm so used to hosting that I forget that I don't always have the control. I apologize. I don't have a substantial amount of updates other than to build off of what was Erica just mentioned about the Vermont Department of Labor. Probably most of you have seen the numbers or gotten some sense of it. I think last week they had almost 23,000 claims compared to the year before where they had 500 in the week. But we are working legislatively and with the the administration, combining thinking, resources, and strategies to try to break the logjam. And there's a private contractor coming in to take off some of the workload by next week to do some of the easier cases and allow the specialists of the Department of Labor to do the more complicated eligibility questions. And they're switching the call patterns. They're going to start doing days. They're going to group by day and chunk of the alphabet to try to corral some of the call volume so that a higher percentage of people actually get through. I think they were fielding 10,000 calls a day. And it's just what we're seeing, as everyone understands, is just the scale of activity and demand compared to the resiliencies and structure of our systems, totally mismatched to the moment. And so there's definitely an attempt to try to figure that out as fast as possible. And I think one of the advantages, frankly, of Vermont's more intimate and small scale political system is that we're all very close to our people. The political leadership is very close to people and getting really good in the moment feedback. And we're able to roll that up to the administration so that they can see patterns emerging in real time and try to react within the Department of Labor with their resources. And so far, really collaborative. Everybody understands how incredibly challenging this is for the business community and for employees, people who are struggling to get access to the financial resources that are theirs, they are eligible for in almost all cases. So um, I guess I would say that we're probably going to need to check in weekly until we see this logjam break. But there are steps being taken to try to really change the dynamic as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Um, I am going to just do a quick glance through the folks here to see if there's any other, see if there are any other representatives. I'm not seeing any. If Okay, I'm going to rely on my colleagues. If there's anybody there, please message me that I've missed. Um, so thank you for that. I am now going to, once again, try to share my screen. I want to pull up a slide that, okay. Are you seeing the agenda? Can someone, okay, all right. For some reason, it's not full screen. So this is I just wanted to do an overview of the relief landscape, and we've talked a lot about the EIDL or EIDL SBA program. We have talked a lot about the PPP program. We'll talk more about those today. So those are federal programs. State resources, we have VITA, the Vermont Economic Development Authority. We have ACCD. Included on here also should be Vermont Department of Labor. Regional resources, we have the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. Local sources, there are the towns that have programs, specifically revolving loan programs. The ones we know about are Brattleboro, Bells Falls. Dover's doing not quite a revolving loan program, but they have another kind of program. I don't know the details, but you can contact the folks at the town offices there. I think they're doing some sort of a business relief grant. And then the town of Wilmington has authorized a low interest or no interest revolving loan program. Erica talked about the next round of federal funding, so it's important to keep our eyes and ears open for what that might look like. And then really transitioning to technical assistance resources and providers, folks like the VTSBDC and the folks here at the VDCC. So it's fluid, it's emerging. This is what we know for now. And of course, as other programs emerge and come online, we will communicate those as soon as we can and get those out. I do see questions that are coming in. As we've done in the past, we are collecting every single one, and as well as the ones that come in through the week. And if we can't answer them either through the chat or through the session itself, then we will do as we did this week and post them to the website, so you can refer back to them. And you know, that's for the benefit of everyone, because you might ask a question, but it might be relevant to another situation. Excuse me. Okay, I believe I've stopped sharing my screen. Is that the case? Can somebody give me a thumbs up? Okay, thanks. Another, you know, I neglected to mention this, but in the video that Sarah did at the top of the session, where she touched on being able to rename yourself, it's also helpful if you're inclined to rename yourself, but not necessarily rename yourself, but include your affiliation. That just helps us and other people on the call to understand who's here and the context of what you might be representing. Okay, I wanted to now transition to the folks here at the BDCC that have been helping businesses in the region. I'm going to turn it over to Adam to say a few words about the BDC, you know, how we've shifted in this time, and to sort of tee this off. So Adam, trying to unmute you. You are unmuted.
Great. Thank you, RT. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see so many friendly and welcome faces here. So right after the governor's announcement in March for the emergency order, we as an organization recognized, of course, that we were going to need to pivot and pivot quickly. So we really wanted to turn our staff to be able to support the businesses in the region. And we, of course, had to figure out how to do that with what information, but also do in a way that could sustain and scale with what we anticipated, and of course has become true, the scale and scope of the need. So that was not an easy task. The folks who will be introducing themselves here shortly have been working in the schools, have been doing workforce development, have been working with internship programs, have been helping recruit people to the state. So these are not individuals who are seeped in small business development advising. So instead, we really wanted everyone to focus on guiding. So we committed ourselves to getting accurate information. If the information wasn't available, we weren't getting out over our tips on it, and really trying to make sure that what we were providing was grounded, accurate information. Now, of course, our partners in the federal government are trying to move very quickly. So even though we were relying on information that they provided, some of that is shifting. And so we will all continue to hear the call for everyone being patient. And as a small business owner myself, I recognize patients are afraid, but we are trying to get that information that is needed by convening conversations like today and having experts like Deborah from the Vermont SBDC be able to speak to that. So really, I share this as initial introduction to the liaisons that you're about to hear from. We set this up first as a pilot with our tenants, and now we are working with over 250 different businesses in the Windham region who've contacted us for information. The amount that we're engaging with them varies, and you'll hear a bit about that today. So we hope you continue to find today's webinar useful. And if you're not already engaged directly with a liaison and you think after hearing from them today that that'll be helpful, we encourage you to follow the steps to make sure you get that connection. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Adam. Okay, so let me just provide a little bit of structure for how we're going to transition to this next section. I'm in a moment, I'm going to introduce Deborah, but I've asked the liaisons to come up with some questions that they are commonly hearing from the folks that they're working with. And so one of the liaisons will introduce themselves and explain what their normal role is at the BVCC, and then ask a series of questions to which Deborah will provide a response. I'm just switching gears here, getting set up. Okay, thank you. I'm navigating between two different monitors, so it's a little bit of a challenge. And the reason why I'm suggesting we do it this way is just so there's less transition between people and voices and things like that. So I'm going to introduce Deborah now. I'm going to unmute her. But Deborah Boudreau is the Southeast Area Business Advisor for Small Business Development Center in Windham and Windsor counties. She has extensive background both with large and small businesses, experience in marketing, operations management, financial forecasting, and consulting with small business owners to create efficient and profitable businesses. Her two main specialty focuses, and she's spoken nationally on both of these, are disaster recovery, so we're pretty lucky, and the creative economy. After Tropical Storm Irene, Deborah was instrumental in the creation of the VTSBDC Disaster Recovery Guide, which has been used extensively by other SBDCs nationwide. So Deborah, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, so the first person to engage with Deborah will be Christy Beatty. I'm going to unmute Christy now.
Hi, Christy.
I'm trying to unmute Christy. All right,
I'm
you
unmuted,
should.
yeah?
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Great. Hi, everyone. Christy Beatty here. It's nice to see some faces that I can put with the emails I've been sending out. My role at BDCC has, in the past couple of years, been as the Pipelines and Pathways Coordinator. So what I normally do is I am in all 4 of the Windham County high schools, connecting students to career preparedness, connecting them to area businesses that are looking for employees, and really just trying to match up their educational pathways with the employment pipelines that are there. So this has been quite a pivot for me, but I just told the team today that I've actually been really enjoying interacting with the businesses in the area, and that this I thought was outside my wheelhouse, but I'm figuring it out pretty quickly. So I am now working with the tenants, our tenants for BDCC, as well as outside businesses as a liaison. So trying to answer as many questions as I can, troubleshoot with folks if they need it. And also, if I can't answer those questions, to reach out and find someone who can. So I'm not always an authority on it, but I am learning fast. So one of the questions, and I see some interesting things that are coming up in the group chat right now, is obviously about the SBA disaster loan, the EIDL. And I know that it indicated that there would be a rapid $10,000 advance with additional funds available for a maximum loan of up to $2 million. So we're working with a client, with a business right now, who applied online for this on April 2nd, and they haven't heard a response. And I can see that in that chat that it's happening to a few other businesses as well. So the first question is, we've seen very little information on what the loan funds over and above the $10,000 advance can be used for. Do you believe this information will be forthcoming after folks have received the confirmation that they've received this loan? And I guess the other question is, how do they apply for those additional funds? Does that make sense, Deborah?
It certainly does. So hello, everyone, and it's really nice to see some faces. I'm going to just take a second and explain a couple of things that I think will help us put this into context. Disaster lending, the EIDL program, the Unemployment Assistance Program, which used to be called DUA, for Disaster Unemployment Act, and now is called PUA. Don't we love the acronyms? These were all federally mandated and run programs. And when in disasters that are discrete, like Irene was discrete to Southern Vermont for a particular time, the SBA and the state, on the state level, Darcy Carter and her team, who are doing heroic things right now, are actually told to step down and stand aside, and a federal team comes out as a deployment. And everything is run federally. Obviously, in this disaster, which is not at all contained on any level, it's everywhere, and there is no foreseeable end in sight, the federal government, the SBA, and in particular the Office of Disaster Assistance, and you're going to start seeing the ODA's name around more, obviously are not capable of handling this whole thing, so they've turned to the states. So at the same time this disaster is happening, the SBA and the local banking community, which is never involved in disaster lending, is being asked to to step up and get ready really quickly. So I think that helps somewhat with the context. We heard last night that 3 million applications have gone in. And I think, unfortunately, there's some real not good clarity around what people are doing when they go online, starting on the 1st of this month, to fill out the EIDL streamlined application. What that is essentially at this point is access to the EEIG money, which they are referring to within that document as an advance. That is up to $10,000. We are waiting, we heard, and then it was withdrawn, and we're waiting now for confirmation of how that up to $10,000 is figured. It will not be, as far as we know at this point in today, and as Adam said, things move quickly in this process and are somewhat changeable. Not every business will receive the full $10,000 grant. No one that we know of in the state of Vermont or with any of our partners around the country has actually received any of those funds yet in their account. Part of that is simply the backlog of how many people and the fact that there was, now somebody has to actually put that money in someone's account, and clearly they needed to ramp that part up. So if you haven't received your money, unfortunately, you're not alone. The full EIDL application is a much longer term process. And I explained on the call once before, and I understand why this is a difficult thing to conceive of, but this is about economic impact and injury. It is that application process is open through the end of December, through the 31st. Post Irene, it was open for 30 days, and we did a little complaining, and they opened it for another 15 days. But that shows you that they understand the length of this is going to be long. Within that period of time, how they assess the loan process. So no one that I know of, even before, has actually fully completed the EIDL application. We produce this thing called disaster lending. At the bottom of that, there is a list of documents and numbers that you should start compiling. It will be much more extensive. We have not seen the full list yet of exactly what you will be asked to provide, but the two numbers that you've put into this streamlined application do not constitute the EIDL application, full application process. So the EIDL is figured on the difference between what happened to you in the last 3 years versus what's happening now. So if you actually did complete an EIDL application right now, which is almost impossible to do, you would simply be reporting impact for February and March because it's a to-date process. So we have a lot of questions in. They have a lot of unanswered questions about when is the right time to do that loan. We know that they're not processing any at the moment because they are in the process of trying to distribute this first EEIG portion of it. It is figured on that the starting point is the difference between the 3 years of previous gross revenues and the impacted period now. That's the beginning, and then things are added in of all the rest of the business financials, the owner's credit score, your ability to repay, and then an amount is offered by the federal government. It's very different than regular lending. Where you know what the amount of money that you need for a project and you go to a bank and request it. This is it's upside down from that. And at the point where you're made an offer, there's a mitigation process. And the reason why you keep hearing the EEIG having been taken out from being explained as a grant to an advance is that at the point you receive an EEIDL offer, they will subtract the amount that you've gotten from the grant and use it as an advance. Now, if you decide not to do the full EIDL process, you will get to keep that money. That money is yours regardless. If you do the process and get denied, you will still be able to keep that money. So, but if you do get it at the end, they mitigate by everything you've done to reduce your injury, and then a final offer is made. So
Okay.
it's the EIDL is not a quick process, nor is it money that you should expect, even if you did it, to come quickly. It's unfortunate that it isn't quicker, but as you can imagine, under these circumstances, we're going to see it be even longer. So if you have done the streamlined application online for the EIDL, all you have done is access the checkbox that says, yes, please consider me for the advance, and you've put in your routing number and your checking account number and your bank name. And as soon as that system unclogs, you will see your amount up to $10,000. And we will tell you as soon as we can how that 10,000 is figured.
Okay.
That was a long answer, but it's
Yeah,
important.
no,
It's an important
you,
distinction.
well, in that answer, you probably touched on a couple of the other questions. So those will go swiftly. So just to summarize, it sounds like the streamlined application was to get folks in the queue for the potential advance, and then more detailed questions are forthcoming for a full application. That's what I'm hearing. Okay.
Yes.
All right, Christy, you had another question.
I do have another question. Yes, and thank you for that, Deborah. That was really helpful. So another question that I've been asked several times is, does the PPP loan require 75% of the loan to be used for payroll expenses?
So the PPP program is, as it's been rolled out this week, is beginning to have more clarity. We are continuing our advice that if you do a PPP, there's we believe a sweet spot client for that right now, and that's any of the essential businesses whose employees are still working, whether in the facility or at home. It makes great sense under those conditions. Under other conditions, it maybe not quite so much, as they continue to figure out how this works. What we do know, and this is for sure, this is in the Treasury document that came to the banks last Thursday night at 11 o'clock, and when they were supposed to open the program on Friday morning. I have not seen a banker yet who isn't trying really hard to get this thing out and done. I have only heard of, and this is answering a question a little bit sooner, I think, Alex, we have only had 2 clients out of all the PPP applications actually get funds into their account. The rest are getting letters from their banks saying that they are waiting for further instructions on from the SBA on disbursement. It is not 100% automatic forgiven. So this idea that the entire thing is forgiven, we are cautioning about. The language says you will get the loan, you will spend the money, and then at the end of the disbursement of the 8 weeks of money, you will go back to the bank and do an application to request forgiveness. We have not seen the application, nor have the banks actually seen more than the Treasury Department's instructions on how forgiveness might be. I think the 75% comes from language in the Treasury Department document that says do not expect, if you use more than 75% of the funds for payroll, that any of that other 25% will be forgiven. So the reality is you should use this money for payroll, and that's kind of it. And know that the rest of the money may or may not be forgiven. And we've also seen language that says forgiveness will be on a sliding scale, even on the payroll portion. So we're asking people before they take the money to actually do a pause and just let's look at it as if it were debt and make a decision. Again, there are companies where this is going to be the perfect solution and a great solution. And it's the solution of trying to get more people off unemployment and back into their jobs. And so from that vantage point, it's of course a great program.
Deborah?
I think we're going to see more unfold as we know. It's really important if you get a PPP to make sure that you keep exquisite records on your, not only your payroll, but how you spend the rest of that money so that you're poised to do whatever that forgiveness process application is going to look like.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Before I go to Alex, I've got a follow-up question. Earlier it was said, I think maybe by Erica, and just a little bit of anecdotal information. This happened to my brother in his business. They applied to the EIDL program early, before the Streamline application was in place. My brother's business received a notification that alerted them to essentially redo the application
Yes.
using the Streamlined, and he has told me that his business went ahead and did that. It's not a heavy lift, that initial application, that second Streamlined application, so it wasn't too hard for them to do that. Is there any way to know, are there any businesses that are sort of hovering out there that, maybe did that too early, in our region, that did that too early, but maybe that email got lost in the shuffle and they really should be doing the Streamlined application and they haven't yet?
So we were told that anyone who had done it before the end of March, so 3/30, should redo it. There is now an 800 number, and the SBA, just like the Department of Labor, has subcontracted customer service out. I did actually have a client today who tried the customer service number and got at least an answer to a question, not the answer we were looking for, but got an answer. So you could certainly call. We suggest strongly that you take a screenshot of every single screen, that you not do the application in the middle of the day. Insomnia is a great gift for this process. Do it, at 2 o'clock in the morning if you can stay awake that long. Make sure that you keep the confirmation application number that's going to appear on the very last screen. Screenshot it, write it on the inside of a folder that has everything else that you gathered to do that first pass through. We have been told at this point, and we have objected loudly all over the country from SBDCs and other people, that they were saying that the next touch you would get would be via phone call. At the same time, the same day, the IRS put out the thing that said don't accept any phone calls because of the level of scammers. So we're saying don't answer that phone call. Eventually you'll get an email, and the email will be the question of, do you want to continue with the full EIDL process? In the meantime, they're just saying you're going to see the money in the bank when that process gets fixed. But if
Okay.
you know that you did it before the 30th, date that folder. If you know that you did it, going back in and doing it again after 4/1 is not going to get you the money any faster. But if you did it before 3/30, you do have to do it again. And on the 301 that we sent the other day, there are some instructions on how to do that.
Okay. All right. So the point is, if you did it before March 30th, you should redo it. Okay, great. All right. Now I'm going to transition to Alex Beck. Let me unmute you. You should be unmuted.
Folks. Yep. My name's Alex. I'm on the workforce team with Christy, and usually what I'm doing is working in high schools with the community colleges, helping with the Career Expo every year. But I am, grateful to be in a position to provide as much information and support as I can. The question that I'm going to pose has to do with timelines, and that, if, for instance, the loans, for instance, the PPP only covers an 8-week period, again, I think referring to the forgivable part. What if folks aren't able to get back to work, or after that 8-week period, that business isn't yet able to open?
It's a very good question, and believe me, we have many questions in on the terms of this, the time frame. The document from the Treasury Department, and if you were on the phone last night on the call with the congressionals, Darcy Carter used the word again, which is that if you get a PPP loan, you are to bring your workers back immediately. We have seen different interpretations of the word immediately from the banks. We've seen everything from it needs to be within the next payroll period to it needs to be by the end of the loan application deadline, which is June 30th. We have a lot of questions about this because, of course, a lot of businesses are saying, can I apply now? Because the big, news story is that it's first come, first served, and the funds are going to run out. So a lot of questions about, I'm a restaurant, I can't bring my employees back. Am I paying them just to stay at home? What happens if I bring them back now and the governor does what he did today, which is bring stay at home to the 15th of May? What happens if that happens again? And I've got employees that I've been able to pay for 8 weeks, but now I can't pay them because my revenue stream is frozen. Can I put them back on unemployment? We have no clear answers to those questions. I'm really sorry. I wish we did. We ask twice a day. That's why we are still saying the sweet spot client for the PPP loan is really those essential businesses that have their employees in place already and have not put them out on furlough or have not, laid them off. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I mean, more to come.
Yeah.
We're going to do another disaster lending update this weekend and give you what we've learned through the week. So it'll be called 401. And we'll do as many of those as we have to continue to do. We do, when we send them to our clients, we do say it's really worth printing those out and getting out your college highlighters and going through it. Even if the information looks like it hasn't changed much, this is a confusing time with a lot of information, and it's not bad to just, reset yourself and reassess every time you see one of those. We don't do them every day. We try to do them when we have enough knowledge that we can give you some more solid information.
Thank you. Alex, question, did you have another question?
I think my other question was answered, I think, was
Okay.
about, has anyone actually received a PPP loan? And is practically no.
Practically no. And again, that's about the SBA giving better instructions on, or the Treasury Department on disbursement of funds. So.
Deborah, do you know who makes the decision? I'm trying to find it in the chat. I just had it. The forgiveness component, is that up to the banks or the Treasury Department?
We are assuming it is going to be entirely up to the Treasury Department, and that's why the banks are saying, if you're reading their fine print, and a lot of banks are just saying this right up front, they have not seen the wording. The wording is that the forgiveness is not automatic, and you will spend the money. At the end of the term of spending the money, you have 60 days to go back to the bank to put in an application for forgiveness. No one has seen the application for forgiveness. There's some documentation on, again, sliding scale, some about the 75% number, some verbiage on don't expect full forgiveness on rent and utilities and interest payments, but that's all. We have not seen the application yet.
And Stephanie Bonin has just posted that there are some folks in town, I'm assuming that's Brattleboro, who have received PPP funds. So that's actually the first that I've learned where funds have hit the street. Casey, you're up next. So Casey, who is relatively new to the BDCC, I'm going to unmute you, God willing. It seems like I gotta hit it twice. No, I'm going for third, unless my co-host is playing tricks on me. Jennifer Stromston, are you? No, darn it. Casey, apologies. There we go. Okay, to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Casey Haynes. Under normal circumstances, I am the talent specialist at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation. I manage our internship program as well as some targeted recruitment for the region. Just like everyone else, I've been pivoting to do a lot of client outreach, business outreach, aggregating information and helping where I can. So my question is, We have 7 staff members who were laid off early on. I'm trying to decide if it makes sense to hire someone back or to give my core staff a raise to meet the 75% of the loan going to payroll threshold for PPP. If PPP is only for 2.5 months and my staff do not have as much to do, should I just hold off? Do we think there will be another round of PPP, i.e. as activity resumes and more payroll support will be needed then?
Good question. Don't shoot the messenger, no answer. And again, the congressionals have been talking to, Adam and his colleagues, my boss and colleagues and her colleagues around the country to try to figure out kind of what went wrong with with the CARES Act, because nothing's perfect. So, where were the places that it missed? One of the discussions certainly is, should we fund, should they put more of this next package into the PPP program, or is there a better way to dispense that money? So I think film at 11, as one of my colleagues would say on that one. Again, what we do is, I think what you guys are trying to do is just sit with each client and go, what is the particulars about this? And believe me, now we're getting questions on it. Didn't come to me on this one, but it's one we've gotten all day long and all week long, which is, what if I offer one of my employees to come back and they want to stay on unemployment because unemployment is a better deal now that you get this additional $600? And I know that the legislature and the Department of Labor is looking into that, whether if you are asked to return to work, that constitutes, and you refuse, that constitutes the end of unemployment. So again, we've asked the question, we're waiting for the actual particular answer. So we'll see, but I don't, and again, this 75%, I think people need to get rid of that number in their head that there's somehow a magical 75% of this loan needs to be payroll. And probably the most logical way to do that is to just think of this as payroll. And I actually talked to a big employer this morning who I think was very wise in how they did this. They did not take the factor. They did not take the 0.5. They took the 2 times their payroll. And they put it in they've set up a separate account for it, and they're going to disperse it week by week. They're going to track it with their employment, their payroll system, and they're not even going to bother to try for that portion.
Deborah, I see Tristan, Representative Tolino sort of writhing around in his chair, and I'm wondering if he can. No. But I know he has to go too. He's got another
yes,
meeting.
Yeah, just fidgeting as usual. But thank you. I'll just jump in really quickly on the state piece, which is that when we did tweaks to the UI eligibility, we established the conditions under which people can be either leave employment, or refuse employment. And so because of COVID risk, and if they don't meet those standards, then they would not be eligible for the UI plus the $600 check unless they meet those standards. And so that was in the legislation, the emergency legislation that the governor signed last week, and it defines the conditions under which those rules apply.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I know you have to take off, but thank you for attending today. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Casey, I think that was it for you. I don't know where you went.
He's down at the bottom. He's
I'm confused. Yeah. So we're transitioning to Vita, our newest member. And I'm going to go through the unmute dance here. There we go. I think you're
Hello, everyone. Thanks, RT.
Yeah.
So hi, everyone. My name is Vita Cripps. Like RT says, I'm the newest member. I'm BDCC's bookkeeper and lease agent. So I have a bit of a hybrid role that supports our director of finance and grant management and our property manager. So right now, through all this, I'm functioning solely as a liaison for tenants and not regional businesses. And I'm also maintaining my role as lease agent by supporting our tenant needs unrelated to financial assistance. So Deborah, my first question is, it appears that CARES programs are very employee focused. We rely on part-time labor and independent contractors primarily, but we have high operation costs from licensing, utilities, insurance, etc. Are there ways to make these programs work better for this type of payroll operations split?
Not the PPP program, probably. Probably not the, I mean, they could do PPP for just the section that works for if they wanted to. Ultimately, the EIDL will probably address some of those issues if their costs have remained the same and their revenues have gone down. But other than that, at this moment, it's a long-term solution and not a short one, unfortunately. And I think that if you start to hear that consistently, I know that the congressionals have been very, very clear about wanting to know where businesses and individuals are feeling like this first round did not hit the mark. So that would be a really important one to share through one of those 800 lines or an email that's been provided.
Great. So the other question is, how long can one wait to close on a loan once approved? And can a business wait?
So again, different loans. The PPP, I don't know the answer to that question, and I would suspect that that's a bank by bank process. I think one of the things that even the bankers have said is that it would have been really nice to have a standardized application for this process, and there just wasn't time. So they kind of left a lot of this to each bank to determine. So again, I know what the ultimate question, and part of that is can I get a PPP, hold the money, and not get it until closer to when I can reopen? Brilliant question with, again, no clear definitive answer. On the EIDL, the reason we are being so uncommunicative about the whole process is because, believe me, we don't work for the SBA either. I hope everybody understands that. The SBDC is funded by appropriations through Congress every year. Our oversight group is the SBA, but we don't work for them, which is why I get to say stuff that maybe other people can't. In the previous process of disaster lending, and we did this, Adam may remember this. I did this with several clients. Adam had this option himself as a small business owner. You could actually go through the entire loan process, get your offer, do your mitigation, and then sign the closing papers and hold the money. And you could hold the money for up to 6 months. And I did that with several clients because it was a great way to have it in their back pocket. But again, you have to think, the EIDL is a loan. The word loan is in there. We don't know whether they're going to allow this money to be held for that period of time. So that's another question that we have, and we haven't seen the answer. I will say again at that point that we're hearing a lot, and you guys are hearing it too. Go get this money, it's yours, you should go get it, you should apply for everything right now. That's the answer to this. That's not the answer to this. 99% of this money is a loan. If the PPP program is totally forgivable, that's fabulous. But the only portion of the rest of it that's not a loan is the EEIG, and that's up to $10,000. So the rest of this is debt. And I think it's really hard to think that that's all that's being offered, but right now that's all that's being offered. And, there are some businesses for whom this might not be the rational response to the problem, is more debt. And there will be, the EIDL will not have 100% approval rate. Right now, one of the other reasons that we're asking our clients not to, even if the SBA contacts them for further information, to hold on that particular part of the process is because we know that at this moment in time, the few EIDLs that were complete, that went through before the end of March, have had astronomically, historically high denial rates. And we have not seen, because they haven't had time to compile why that's happening. So we don't know if it's a systems problem, or it's a credit score problem, or it's an ability to repay problem. So we can't help you think about this as a vehicle until we understand a little bit more about that process. There is an appeal process in a normal EIDL process, but again, we have not seen the factors around this one as the Office of Disaster Assistance is trying to figure out how to take this from a specific regional thing to a national program.
Deborah, thank you. Vita, thank you. And Alex and Christy, thank you so much. I'm going to transition now to some questions that are in the chat. I know we're past the hour mark, but I think this is really important. So if we could just take a few more moments. And Deborah, do you have a few more moments?
I do. I have a few.
Thank you. So if there's an employee working at a store, can you still apply for PPP? Curbside pickup and delivery is only a minimal amount of sales compared to normal sales. So I think so. An operation has one employee at this moment on payroll. Are they still eligible for PPP?
Yeah, so everybody is eligible for PPP. It's just that we at the VTS-BDC, and other people may not agree with us. We're not, you don't all have to agree with me for sure. We said the sweet spot is people who already have employees that they're paying. If they have an employee that they are paying right now, then PPP is a logical process for them. The piece of PPP that's going to become more difficult is that the payroll portion of it. So if you have an employee that you pay a paycheck, you're withholding all the taxes, you're doing that, you most likely have a payroll service. Those payroll services have all been alerted. They're redoing some of their forms so that you can actually go and grab the information that you need for the PPP in sort of one unit now, which is great. But you have 940s, 941s, all of the kind of tax things around payroll that are supportive of that first calculation, which is the payroll for 2019 averaged out for 1 month times 2.5. That's the sort of basis of this calculation. The problem becomes the LLC owners and the sole proprietors and the contractors who don't pay themselves as employees. Is how does the bank, who has been charged with verifying their information, what kinds of documents can they use that verifies the amount that an owner has taken in the previous year? And if you haven't filed your 2019 taxes, then that becomes even more problematic. So they're trying to figure that out. Do know that the Treasury instructions require them to figure this out. So we've had a couple of banks come back and say, we're just not going to deal with that part of the thing. You can just go back and say, we've got some wording we can give you that says you have to look at this, but it is going to be more problematic than, so I've seen people who have employees pay themselves as owners, have decided simply to do the PPP on the employees because it was a faster process and it got them, what they needed more quickly.
Great, thank you. I see that Chris Saunders has joined us. I'm going to unmute Chris. Chris, how are you today?
I'm swell, RT. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Something that's come up in the chat, there's been a lot of discussion, and someone's posted that a loan must be closed in 10 days. Do you know, is that?
Yeah, we did get some clarity from SBA and Vermont bankers. I've been on a couple calls with them this week. They do need to close the loan within 10 days. So loans, say last Friday that they accepted and granted, they need to close on those by next Tuesday.
Okay.
So the process is moving. They're still waiting on some closing documents from SBA, but some banks are proceeding without those documents and just saying, we're going to figure it out later. We need to take care of our customers. And
Okay.
so that's moving forward.
And Chris, my apologies. I didn't see it earlier. Would you like to say a few comments? Do you have some updates you'd like to provide?
So yeah, there have been a couple things that have been out there that we are very conscious of. Issues for, I think, as Deb said, businesses that aren't open right now and are trying to figure out whether to wait or whether they could hold the loan and disperse it later. And that's effectively a calculated risk for a business owner right now. Congress is definitely going to add more money to this program. It's just a matter of when and what other changes they make to the rules. We've certainly heard plenty of concern that an 8-week payback is not enough, or an 8-week forgiveness for a restaurant or a bed and breakfast or an inn that doesn't know when they're going to be allowed to reopen. So they're very hesitant to take the loan, not having that in sight. And so we've received requests to say extend the 8-week forgiveness period to a longer period of time, or allow us to decide when that period would apply. So we're working through those things with Senator Leahy and thinking about what we have to do to change in statute, because some of this was written into the law in order for it to work better. Likewise, we've heard the concern for businesses that are currently closed, anxious about if they take the loan and their employees are currently on unemployment, and those unemployment benefits are more generous than the wages they were being paid, will they be able to bring those workers back on before the June 30th deadline? And if they're not, then they are culpable and won't have the loan forgiven. So that's absolutely a valid concern, and another issue that we've been talking about. There was a flurry of activity in Washington yesterday trying to add some money to this program. It wasn't done in a very thoughtful, bipartisan way, which is why it didn't succeed. And there are a lot of needs out there in addition to the needs of the business community. And I think it was many people's perspective that this needs to be done in a collaborative, big fashion, as opposed to piecemealing, saying we're going to address one need here and one need there. A tough thing to do in the best of times, harder to do when Congress is spread across the country. So the rollout has been bumpy. I think people acknowledge that. And we are absolutely listening to what Vermonters are saying, and the senator is trying to make sure that those concerns get addressed in various programs and updates that happen. One other piece that we have heard is lack of eligibility around agriculture businesses for the EIDL program. In one of the bills that the senator helped put forward yesterday, that correction was in there. So I think that's something there's a lot of support for. And I guess just the other piece we know is that banks today, despite being required to, are really not set up to handle the incoming applications from sole proprietors and independent contractors. Treasury has not given banks the guidance they need to be able to start processing those applications. So we know it's frustrating. We know people are stressed. A little more patience is going to be required if that's a route that you're thinking of pursuing. So yeah, that would be my general update, and apologies for hopping on so late, but I'll be around and can answer questions on the chat as you guys are still talking.
Yeah, really appreciate it. And Chris or Deborah, it was referenced, I think Deborah, you referenced it in using Adam as an example, where a small business could hold the funds for a while. Did you say, I'm just looking for clarification, is that possible?
Not the PPP. We have no guidance on holding the PPP funds.
Okay.
And we have not had specific guidance on holding funds from the EIDL. I'm sorry, I can't call it idle. I just can't.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time saying PUA.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but we are in tradition, in past EIDL environments when this was in this program. The EIDL program's been around for a very long time. It's what was here for Irene. It's what's here for the fires in California. I mean, it's a national program that's been around for a very long time. You could, in that configuration, hold the funds for 6 months post signing for them. We are hoping, we are asking, I'm sure Chris is hearing it too, for that to be part of this program, because again, if someone wants to go through the process, it's not odious. It's way more than what you're seeing online right now, but it's not an odious process. It's a regular lending process. It can, for those clients that I had post Irene, it was just a nice comfort to have that money and know that it was there. And once you have it and you've signed for it, you can disperse it within like 48 hours. It was something really quick.
Yeah.
But just knowing you had it. So we're hoping that that part comes, but it's about the EIDL, not the PPP. The PPP, that question is out and has not been answered.
Okay. This is a super technical question. Is closing the loan and accepting the money, are those two separate things?
In this case, they are, and that's just bank terminology where, you know, what Chris was just referring to is they don't have the closing documents from the SBA yet, so that the banks that have given money out are giving it out without them. It's usually that you get informed that your application has been accepted, that the amount of money that you've requested from that first calculation of 2.5 is the amount of money that you're going to get, or if you, and so now you know the number, and then you sign a bunch of papers usually, and the money goes into your account. So it's the like regular bank closing. So it's a terminology thing. And right now we have a lot of clients who have actually heard that they have money, but because these SBA closing documents are not in the bank's hands yet, some banks are being reticent, and I don't blame them, about dispersing the funds into people's accounts before they have those. But I'm sure the SBA is working on those really hard as we speak.
Okay. Is it possible? Okay, so is it, I'm always nervous reading these without previewing them. Is it possible to take less than 100% of what you've applied for, you know, similar to a home equity line?
I have not seen that condition in this, but as I said, the business owner that I talked to this morning that was really smart just created a second account at the bank and put all of the money in there. Now, if he doesn't use it all, then he just does a payment of it back at the end. I mean, so when I used to have my business, and it was before all of the fancy banking things, because I'm a whole lot older than I'd like to admit, although feeling it more today than usual. You know, I just had a savings account that I named the government, and I put my payroll taxes and those kinds of things in that account, and just didn't think of it as my money. So what he was saying was he was setting up the same situation. My recommendation would be to do that. It would be to, on the PPP, take the money, put it in your account, create a separate account. It's not that hard to do. Or just make sure that you're not looking at it in the balance of your checkbook when you're deciding what else to pay.
Yeah.
And keep that money separate. And if you have money left over at the end, make a payment. And then, you know, through the forgiveness process, see how much more you might owe.
And I'm assuming there's no prepayment penalties on these kinds of programs.
No prepayment penalties.
Okay.
There's no prepayment penalties on any of the SBA vehicles ever.
Adam in the chat has made a comment. It's an important point. You don't need to apply for the full 2.5 times amount. That's part of the calculus. You can elect at application to take less.
That's what I was saying. My business owner could have gotten more money if he'd done the 2.5 factor, and instead he just took his payroll times 2. And so he didn't take the extra money that goes, you know, that factor that allows for rent and utilities and interest payments. He just said, all I want is payroll. I got the other stuff covered. I don't want a chance that it's not going to be forgiven. I'm just going to take the payroll portion. So anyone could do that same thing.
Okay. Deborah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it very much. Chris, thank you for joining us. I don't know if you can see, I'm shifting my gaze, so I'm looking at you as I say thank you. Christy Beatty, thank you. Vita Cripps, thank you. Adam, thank you. Where's Alex? I don't know. Oh, Alex, thank you. So appreciate everyone's efforts. Thank you for all the questions. And I think this concludes the 4th edition of this webinar series. I want everybody to have a great weekend and take care.